Hey guys, welcome to Sportitude Running. My name is Josh, and today we have got a pretty honest, consistent, whatever you'd like to call it, shoe review. But right in front of me here, I've got the Hoka Bondi 8, and to my right, we have the Hoka Bondi 7. So in today's review, we're going to be comparing the two side by side, talk all things outsole, midsole, and upper, and give you a little bit of information about this shoe, because whether it is through reputation or not, the Hoka Bondi franchise has been the king and the queen of the max cushioned category for a decade now, and it has been a very popular shoe for a lot of our podiatry and physio referrals out there looking to address issues without the forefoot, be it forefoot pathology issues, any sort of load reduction we can do through the metatarsal heads. We have obviously brought up the Hoka Bondi as a good starting point. So as I touch on today's review, we'll get into all the outsole, the midsole, the upper, compare them side by side, give you all the information that you need at home to, who knows, maybe make this your next max cushioned shoe purchase. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Okay, dialing in, first things first, this shoe here is a neutral shoe. The Gaviota is their max cushion shoe, which is designed for your overpronator. But the Bondi 8, the actual application or who this is pitched for has not changed. It's dialed in for that neutral foot type. So therefore, what we're talking about there, on the medial side, there's no additional gradient or J-frame support, which is what Hoka have been using for a decade. They have looked at this shoe, engineered it for that neutral foot type. However, like a lot of shoes out there, I myself am a mild overpronator, and I found the Hoka Bondi 8 very comfortable for my long daily runs or my easy runs out on the road. Now, the other thing too we need to address with this shoe itself is where does it sit in your shoe rotation? So I think it sort of targets two areas, to be honest. So you've got to have someone who's going to buy this, who they're going to actually use it 2-3 times a week as their long day shoe, their everyday shoe for those easy runs out on the road. But there'll be a cohort of runners that may find it a little bit heavy and maybe a bit too dense, and they will use this shoe purely and simply for recovery days where you're a bit beaten up, be it from a race or a really hard workout, and the next day you've got to back it up with a slow, easy day run. Well, the Bondi 8 is going to cater quite well for you because it's extremely well cushioned, and with that rocker sole throughout the forefoot, you're going to find it a really easy shoe to exit out of your gait cycle. Okay, let's dial into the fun part of all my shoe reviews and start talking about how this shoe is put together. Let's look at the outsole first. Side by side next to the Bondi 7, not a lot has changed. You have a really good surface area, plenty of outsole on offer. There's a wee bit of exposed Hoka EVA throughout the midfoot or mids part of this shoe, pardon me, through here. However, it's probably more to do with the decoupled lines. The decoupled lines, what I mean by that is, are a wee bit deeper in the back of this shoe in comparison to where they were last year. What does that do? Well, for your heel striker, it just means you're going to be able to compress that midsole compound a little bit more on your entry, so you get a bit more compression or cushioning on your entries, sorry to say. But coming through to the forefoot, you can see there's a couple of vertical lines on offer, which is again going to complement what this rocker sole does, and that's more to do with the midsole part of this shoe review. But again, plenty of surface area with that outsole coverage. The only real exposed areas are through the midfoot and this medial side through here. Again, don't be alarmed. That's not a really high wearing or high friction area. A lot of the high impact is going to be in the lateral part of that heel and the lateral part of this midfoot. So that's been addressed with the outsole coverage. And as we touched on, not too dissimilar to what we had last year. Okay, coming to the upper of this shoe, what we have is essentially an engineered mesh. So what that means is it's a mesh that's going to provide enough support for your long runs out on the road, but you're going to get enough ventilation. It's not the thinnest mesh upper on the market, and nor would you expect that because this shoe is not designed to be a lightweight shoe. It's designed to be a really comfortable cushion shoe. And when we talk about comfort and cushioned, a lot of the attention is focused on what's underneath the foot. However, little attention is given to what's on top of the foot. But in the case of the Hoka Bondi 8, the tongue is a little bit thicker, in my opinion, than where it was last year. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, only time will tell. I find it pretty comfortable, to be fair. You can always adjust your laces to be whatever you require for the amount of depth you need. Sometimes runners miss an eyelet here or there to get the appropriate amount of depth. It's totally up to you how you want to conform that lacing construction. However, with a shoe like this, I'm all about comfort. If I can get a slightly sort of more cushion feel on top of my arch, I will go for it. I like how this shoe feels personally. The tongue's plenty thick enough. You get a little bit of ventilation through it. But as I addressed earlier, it's a little bit thicker than last year's 7. The other thing to note is the shoe itself has the internal heel counter at the back. Same thing as last year's model, but it is a little bit shallower. Just a little bit. So if you've been using the 6s and the 7s and you've had an orthotic, you want to make sure that you probably get the right fit with your Bondi 8s and your orthotic has the appropriate amount of depth on play for your orthotic to sit inside this shoe. Now, obviously, you can use that last eyelet to get a heel lock lace in to give you the security you require. However, don't think or assume, I should say, that your orthotic from a 7 is going to feel and fit and perform as well as it does in the 8. You really need to make sure that it's going to be A-OK. Coming through to the forefoot as well, in my opinion, this shoe is marginally shallower than what we had last year, and that's probably going to come more into play when you get towards the last 10 to 15% of the life of this shoe. Because this shoe fitted pretty good, Bondi 6 and Bondi 7 had a pretty consistent trend. Once your shoe got towards the back end of its life, because the foam pressed down a little bit, we found the shoe to sort of fit a little bit deeper. So depending on who you were, what runner out there, more often than not, we really had to keep adjusting that lace on top to get the secured fit and feel we need, because the shoe kept getting deeper and deeper through the toe box. I think they've addressed that here by being a little bit shallower from the get-go, but where that will come into play is when the shoe gets towards the last sort of chapter of its life, where you won't be having to adjust the top of the lace too much to get that dialed in fit. Okay, let's talk all things midsole with this shoe, because let's be honest, this is where this shoe has its reputation. Max cushioned, a lot of shoe under the foot, and that rocker configuration through the forefoot. So what we have is a 33mm heel, 29mm forefoot for that offset of 4mm. And like some brands out there, they do engineer their men's and women's shoes to be marginally different. So the ladies, we have a 31 heel, 27 forefoot. Still a 4mm offset, but a slight reduction in stack height with that shoe. Now, as I said, max cushion means you're going to have a lot of compression underneath your foot. The midsole itself, in terms of its overall stack and numbers, is very similar to where it was last year in the 7 and the 6. However, with the visual aspect of this shoe, you can see that the execution where they've I suppose put those little flex grooves in the midsole on the lateral side and the medial side. They have been strategically placed almost like a gradient layer level, so that over time the shoe itself will compress in the right areas. The biggest change isn't in the amount of cushioning, it's more to do with the surface area. So I could have touched on this with regard to the outsole part of this review, but it's probably more relevant to the midsole, because when you look at the shoe itself, and I hold it up like so, you can see the contrast of colour from the yellow to the grey, the upper being the grey and the yellow being the midsole. You can see there's quite a lot of width on offer either side of that upper. So what does that mean? Well, it means that for the foot type out there that sits on top of this platform, you're going to get a lot of stability. Simple as that. So if you have a tendency to lately in your runs to overpronate slightly, which is kind of where I fall into that category, to be honest, you still get a lot of medial support purely and simply because you've got a lot of extra built up walls on that medial side. Same thing goes on the lateral side. So if someone has to be a late stage supinator, this shoe will still hold up quite well on the back ends of your long runs. The other thing too, which I touched on in the outsole part of this review, but these decoupled lines being marginally deeper than what it was last year in the 7, what that does for the overall performance of the midsole is that when you hit the ground, being at heel striker first, you get a fair bit more cushioning just because they have made those flex grooves a bit deeper in the outsole. And then as you come through to the mid-starts, as we touched on, the different layers of flex grooves from the back of the shoe to the forefoot, and almost looks like it dips down like a rocket sole, which it does. That's where that midsole performance and cushioning performs the same from the mid to the toe-off part of this gait cycle for you runners out there. And as I touched on in my intro part of this shoe review, I'll go into it a little bit more detail now, but the vast majority of purchases over the last few years for us here at Sportitude Running, and I'd argue it's probably the same with a lot of specialty running shoes out there, running shoe stores out there that is that we tend to have a lot of referrals for this shoe from your podiatrists and physiotherapists. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get their walkers or runners out there to take load off their forefoot. So be it forefoot pathology issues, any sort of inflammation, swelling, any built-up, sometimes arthritis within regards to the metatarsals of the forefoot, any way that we can take some load off that front half of the shoe, the Outsole does take a considerable amount of load off of the exit of your gait cycle. Now, that's the same for running as it is for walking. So we do tend to sell a lot of these shoes just for walkers, and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. However, this shoe is a running shoe. It's designed for max performance, max cushioned out on the road. So if you're thinking about taking load off your forefoot when you're walking, well, naturally it's going to be the same for when you're running. So taking a lot of load off that front half of your foot is just going to make your long and easy runs a lot more comfortable and a lot more effortless, to be fair. So that's where this shoe has been really, really well received for people looking at their recovery runs. They've bashed themselves up the day before with a race or a session, and the following morning they want to just tick the legs over. Bondi has always been a very popular option for those runners out there. Okay, guys, in summarising, we've addressed it. It's a max cushion neutral shoe. It is the king of the rocker soles. Now, as I said, whether that's through reputation or through performance, that's a subjective opinion. However, Hoka really did change the way shoes have been engineered. So when they landed well over a decade ago, they really did start to change how brands addressed fit, feel, and performance. And I think it's fantastic. The progression of Hoka and the progression of the Bondi franchise has been sensational. 6 and 7, very similar, still a very popular shoe. But what we have with the 8 right now, in my opinion, I think it's more runnable. It's probably a little bit more dialed in for your runner, where we said a minute ago that we do still sell a lot of Bondis for your walkers out there, mainly through referrals from our podiatry and physio partners. But the Bondi 8 is probably the most runnable Bondi that I can remember in the last few years, and that is a good thing. It's a running shoe. Now, where or what other shoes come into the same conversation? Well, you know, as I said, it is probably the king and the queen of this category. But if you have looked at your New Balance Moors over the last couple of years, you may have a bit of a look at a ASICS Glide Ride 3, your Saucony Endorphin Shift, those max cushion shoes with that element of rocker technology through the front half. Well, hey, we can have a conversation about whether the Bondi is going to be right for you. It's not the lightest shoe out there. Let's just address that straight off the bat. It's not designed to be light. It's around 304 grams in a men's size 9 and around that sort of 255, 260 grams, pardon me, in a ladies size 7. Yes, it's not overly heavy, but it's not really light. And again, it's not a light shoe, so it's designed to be comfortable, and it is exactly that. If you've got any questions about the Bondi 8, the Bondi 7s, where they have come from, or you're a Hoka lover, just let us know why you love Hokas in the comment section below. They have got a cult following, and a lot more people are jumping onto that bandwagon and love what Hoka represent. The other thing too is if you haven't subscribed to our channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, stay notified, and we'll keep pumping out these shoe reviews for you, the running community, all over the world, wherever you are, the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere. We love to help you find the best fitting running shoes so you can enjoy your running experience and your running journey. So until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another, happy running, and we'll see you out on the road. Take care.